Chosen ones, if you have been waking up exhausted no matter how much you sleep, if you have felt foggy, emotional, and strangely disconnected from your own thoughts, you are not imagining it, and you are not broken. Something real is happening in the sky right now, and it is affecting far more people than you would expect. This is shaping up to be one of the strangest weeks of the year, and by the end of this video you are going to understand exactly why you feel the way you feel, what is actually going on above your head, and what you can do to move through it instead of being flattened by it. So stay with me because this is going to explain a lot. Let's start with the tiredness because that is what brought you here. This is not ordinary tiredness. Ordinary tiredness responds to sleep. You rest, you recover, you feel better. This tiredness is different. You can sleep 8, 9, 10 hours and still wake up feeling like you never went to bed. Your body feels heavy, your thoughts feel slow. Small tasks feel like they take enormous effort. You might feel unusually emotional, tearing up over things that would not normally affect you, or feeling strangely nostalgic, thinking about people and moments from years ago out of nowhere. You might feel foggy in conversations, forgetting words, losing your train of thought, rereading the same sentence 3 times. And underneath all of it, there is this quiet feeling that something is shifting, even if you cannot name what. Here is the simple reason why. The sky right now is unusually busy. Multiple planets are doing significant things at the same time, and when that happens, it does not stay up in the sky. It filters down into how we feel, how we sleep, how clearly we think, and how much emotional weight we are carrying without realizing it. You do not need to understand every technical detail of astrology to feel the effects of a week like this, the same way you do not need to understand meteorology to feel a change in the weather. You just feel it. And this week, a lot of people are feeling it. The biggest piece of this puzzle is Mercury. Mercury has been retrograde, which most people already associate with delays, mixed signals, and things generally feeling scrambled. But right now Mercury is doing something more specific and more intense than a normal retrograde. It is passing extremely close to the Sun, in what astrologers call a chasm, which simply means the planet is sitting right at the heart of the Sun for a brief window. Think of it like this. If Mercury retrograde is a foggy day, chasm is the moment the fog gets so thick you genuinely cannot see 3 feet in front of you right before it suddenly clears. It is intense, it is disorienting, and then it passes and leaves a strange kind of clarity behind it. That is exactly why your mind might feel scrambled one moment and unexpectedly clear the next. You are moving through the thickest part of the fog right now, and clearing is coming, just not yet. On top of that, the Sun and Moon are both moving through Cancer this week, which is the most emotionally sensitive, memory-heavy, home and family-focused stretch of the entire year. Cancer season does not ask you to perform, achieve, or push forward. It asks you to feel. It brings old memories to the surface. It makes you more sensitive to your environment, more affected by the mood of the people around you, more aware of what feels safe and what does not. Combine that emotional undertow with a Mercury chasm scrambling your thoughts, and you get exactly what you have been experiencing. A mind that feels foggy, a heart that feels unexpectedly full, and a body that feels like it is working overtime just to process it all. That processing is invisible, but it is not nothing. It burns real energy. That is where your tiredness is actually coming from. There is also a new lunar cycle beginning this week, a new moon in Cancer which always acts like a soft reset button for our emotional life. Right before a new moon, most people go through what feels like an emotional clearing out, old feelings resurfacing so they can be released, tension building right before it lifts. If you have felt unusually raw or unusually reflective the last few days, that is very likely what you have been in the middle of. New moons ask us to slow down before they ask us to begin again. And most of us are not used to slowing down, so it can feel uncomfortable even though it is exactly what is needed. And underneath all of this, there is a slower, heavier layer running in the background. Some of the outer planets, the slow-moving ones that shape entire seasons of life rather than single days, are forming significant angles to each other right now. You do not need to track exactly which planets or which angles to feel the effect. What you need to know is that this kind of outer planet activity tends to bring a sense that something bigger than your daily routine is shifting. a feeling that the ground itself is slightly unstable, even if nothing dramatic has actually happened yet in your life. That background hum is part of why this week feels different from an ordinary busy week. It is not just your schedule, it is not just your sleep. There is a genuine cosmic congestion happening, several major shifts overlapping at once, and your nervous system is doing its best to keep up with all of it. So let's bring this back to something practical. Why does all of this leave you tired specifically? Emotional processing takes energy, real, measurable energy, even though we rarely talk about it that way. When your mind is quietly working through old memories, unresolved feelings, or unclear situations, even if you are not consciously thinking about any of it, your system is still spending resources on it in the background, the same way your phone drains battery running apps you are not actively looking at. This week, with Cancer season stirring emotional material, a Mercury chasm scrambling and then clarifying your thoughts, and a new moon asking you to release before you begin again, your inner world has an unusually full plate. The fatigue you feel is the natural result of a lot of invisible work happening beneath the surface. Now, I want to be clear about something, because I do not want you to panic or think something is wrong with you. This is not a sign of illness, and it is not something to fear. It is closer to what athletes call an adaptation period, the tired, sore, foggy stretch that happens right before you come out stronger and clearer on the other side. Your body and mind are recalibrating. That takes energy. It is supposed to feel like this for a little while. It will not feel like this forever. That said, if exhaustion like this continues for a long stretch of time, if it comes with symptoms that concern you, or if it starts to affect your ability to function day to day, please do not simply wait it out and assume the stars will fix it. Talk to a doctor. Astrology can offer language and context for what you are feeling, but it is never a replacement for medical care, and a good astrologer would tell you the same thing. A quick note on something people often ask during weeks like this. No, feeling this tired does not mean something is astrologically wrong with you specifically. And no, it does not mean you are somehow more cursed or more targeted than anyone else. Weeks with this much overlapping planetary activity affect large numbers of people at the same time, across every background and every sign. If it feels like everyone around you seems a little more tired, a little more sensitive, or a little more scattered than usual lately, that is not a coincidence either. You are simply one of the people paying enough attention to actually notice it and ask why instead of just pushing through it confused. Let's talk about what this week is actually asking of you, because there is a real difference between a week that is testing your patience for no reason and a week that is asking you to do something specific. This week is asking you to slow your pace, not stop completely, but slow down. This is not the week to force big decisions, launch major projects, or push through exhaustion out of sheer willpower. Mercury being this close to the Sun means communication can be unusually easy to misread right now, both what you say and what you hear. A message that feels neutral to you might land differently than you intended. A comment that stings might not have been meant the way it felt. Before you react strongly to anything communication related this week, it is worth pausing and asking whether you are responding to what was actually said, or to the tiredness and sensitivity you are already carrying. This is also a week to be gentle with your body. Fatigue like this is your system asking for rest, not asking you to push harder. If you can, lighten your schedule where you realistically can. Say no to things that are optional. Give yourself permission to go to bed earlier than usual, even if it feels unproductive. Rest during a week like this is not laziness, it is maintenance. You are not falling behind by resting through a genuinely heavy cosmic stretch. You are simply working with the moment instead of against it. Pay attention to what comes up emotionally this week, even the uncomfortable things, especially the uncomfortable things. Cancer season has a way of surfacing old memories and unresolved feelings specifically so they can finally be processed and released, not so they can be relived over and over. If an old memory or an old hurt resurfaces this week, it is not necessarily a step backward. It may simply be the last round of processing before it finally settles. Let it come up, You do not have to act on every feeling that surfaces, but suppressing it tends to prolong the fatigue rather than relieve it. Watch how you communicate this week, particularly anything important. If you can delay a genuinely high-stakes conversation, a big negotiation, or a major decision until Mercury is no longer this close to the Sun, it is generally worth the wait. Mercury will station direct again before too long, and once it does, the fog that has been slowing your thinking will lift noticeably. If a decision truly cannot wait, take extra care to double-check details, reread messages before sending them, and give yourself more space than usual before responding to anything that triggers a strong reaction. Also notice who and what genuinely restores your energy this week versus who and what quietly drains it. Because your system already has less spare capacity than usual right now, it becomes much easier to notice which relationships and situations cost you more than they give back. That is useful information. You do not need to make any dramatic decisions about it this week. Just notice it, write it down if that helps. Awareness now often becomes clarity later once the fog actually lifts. If you have been putting off any kind of care for yourself, physical, emotional, or otherwise, this is a good week to prioritize it in small, manageable ways. You do not need a dramatic overhaul, a slower morning, an earlier bedtime, a short walk without your phone, a conversation with someone who actually listens. These small things matter more than usual this week because your system is working harder than usual beneath the surface, and small acts of care go further than they normally would. Let's walk through how this week tends to unfold, because the energy is not flat, it moves through distinct phases, and knowing roughly where you are in that movement can help a lot. Earlier in the week, the focus was mostly outward, sudden bursts of restlessness, flashes of impatience, the feeling of wanting to move fast even though your body was already tired. That is the kind of friction that shows up when fast-moving energy runs into deeper, slower-moving pressure underneath it. If you found yourself unusually irritable or unusually impulsive a few days ago, that was very likely what you were feeling. Right now, in the middle of the week, the focus shifts inward. This is the Mercury-Casimir window, the point of maximum fog right before the clearing, layered with the emotional depth of Cancer season. This is very much the tired, foggy, emotionally full stretch we have been talking about. If today or the last day or two have felt like wading through wet sand, mentally and physically, that tracks exactly with what is happening overhead, this is not a sign you are falling behind. This is the peak of the fog, which also means you are closer to the other side of it than you might think. As the week continues toward the new moon, the energy softens into something quieter and more reflective. This is a natural point for emotional release, for realizing that something you have been carrying suddenly feels lighter, for small moments of clarity even while you are still generally tired. Pay attention around this point in the week for any small realization or unexpected sense of relief. It may not be dramatic, but it is often meaningful. Toward the latter part of the week and into the following one, watch for a noticeable shift in tension around communication and relationships. As Mercury slowly starts to prepare for its eventual return to direct motion, conversations that have felt stuck or confusing tend to loosen up. This does not mean everything resolves instantly, but the fog does thin out bit by bit. If there is a conversation you have been avoiding because your thoughts have felt too scrambled to have it clearly, waiting until this later window is usually wiser than pushing through it while everything still feels foggy. I also want to briefly touch on how this tends to land differently depending on your general temperament, without turning this into a full breakdown of every sign, because the core message matters more than the details. If you tend to be an action-oriented, high-energy person, this week likely feels the most frustrating for you, because your instinct is to push through tiredness and keep moving, and this week specifically rewards the opposite approach. Slowing down will feel counterintuitive, but it will serve you better than forcing your usual pace. If you tend to be a steady, practical, routine-oriented person, this week may show up as a stronger than usual need for comfort, familiar food, familiar spaces, familiar people. Lean into that instinct rather than fighting it. There is nothing wrong with wanting extra comfort during a genuinely heavy stretch. If you tend to be a mentally quick, communication-oriented, socially active person, this week is probably hitting your mind the hardest: the fog, the forgetfulness, the sense of losing your train of thought mid-sentence. Give yourself more grace than usual in conversations, and give other people more grace too, since a lot of people are dealing with the same static right now, even if they have not noticed the cosmic reason behind it. And if you tend to be a deeply feeling, intuitive, emotionally attuned person, this week is likely landing the hardest emotionally for you: old memories, unexpected tears, a heaviness that is hard to explain to people who process things more logically. This is exactly the kind of week your sensitivity is built for, even though it does not feel like a gift in the moment. You are not overreacting, you are simply more attuned to something that is genuinely happening. Whichever of these sounds most like you, the underlying advice stays the same: slow your pace, protect your rest, watch your words a little more carefully, and let old feelings move through instead of pushing them back down. None of this is about diagnosing yourself with a label. It is simply about recognizing your own natural tendencies so you can work with this week instead of fighting it. I also want to gently address something that tends to come up during weeks like this: the temptation to make a big decision simply because you are exhausted and want the discomfort to end. Quitting something, ending something, walking away from something purely because you are tired right now is one of the most common mistakes people make during a heavy astrological stretch like this one. Tiredness has a way of making everything feel more dire and more permanent than it actually is. If a thought like "I need to quit this, I need to end this, I need to walk away from this" shows up this week with unusual intensity, it is worth asking yourself honestly whether that thought is coming from genuine long-term clarity or from short-term exhaustion wearing the costume of clarity. If you are not sure which one it is, that uncertainty is itself useful information. Give it a little more time before you act on it. On the other hand, do not confuse this advice with an instruction to ignore everything you are feeling until the week passes. There is a real difference between a decision made from panic and a decision made from quiet, settled certainty that happens to arrive during an inconvenient week. If something has felt true and clear for a long time, long before this week began, this stretch is not necessarily telling you to abandon that clarity. It may simply be testing whether you can hold onto it even while you are tired. The key question is not whether the timing feels dramatic. The key question is whether the feeling itself is new and reactive or old and steady. One more thing worth mentioning: dreams tend to be unusually vivid, unusually strange, or unusually memorable during a Mercury chasm-y window like this one, especially layered with Cancer's emotional depth. If your sleep has felt restless, or if you have been waking up remembering dreams you would normally forget within minutes, that is a very common experience this week. If it feels meaningful, it is worth jotting a few notes down when you wake up, even briefly. You do not have to interpret every dream. Sometimes simply writing it down is enough to let your mind release it and move on, which can genuinely help with the fog and fatigue we have been talking about this whole time. Let's also talk briefly about the physical side of this, because tiredness like this rarely stays only in your mind. Many people report headaches that come and go without a clear trigger, tension sitting in the shoulders and neck, a stomach that feels unsettled for no obvious reason, or a general heaviness in the limbs that makes even simple movement feel like more effort than usual. None of this is unusual for a week carrying this much emotional and mental weight. Your body and mind are not separate systems working independently. They are constantly talking to each other, and when your mind is quietly processing a large volume of emotional material, your body often carries some of that weight too. If you have felt more physically tense or achy than usual this week, that is very likely connected to everything we have already talked about, not a separate problem on top of it. It also helps to know that appetite and energy can shift unpredictably during a week like this. Some people find themselves wanting to eat more, reaching for comfort food, craving familiar meals that feel safe and grounding. Others find their appetite shrinks. Food feels like one more thing to manage when everything already feels like a lot. Neither response is wrong. If you notice either pattern in yourself this week, Treat it with curiosity rather than judgment. Eat when you are hungry, rest when you are tired, and try not to add extra pressure on top of what your body is already managing. Sleep itself may also feel strange this week, not just in how tired you feel, but in how you actually sleep. Some people fall asleep easily but wake up in the middle of the night for no clear reason. Others feel wide awake at bedtime despite being exhausted all day, only to crash hard once they finally do fall asleep. If your sleep pattern has felt a little off, that tracks with everything happening overhead right now, and it is generally not something to worry about long term. Give yourself permission to nap if you need to go to bed earlier than usual, or to simply rest even if you cannot fully sleep. Rest in any form, even without perfect sleep, still counts. One more reassurance before we move forward. If you have felt more forgetful than usual this week, misplacing your keys, walking into a room and forgetting why, blanking on a word you use all the time, that is an extremely common experience during a Mercury chasm window layered with an emotionally heavy season like this one. It does not mean anything is wrong with your memory long term. Your mental bandwidth is simply being spent elsewhere right now, on all of the invisible processing we have already talked about. Once the fog thins out, your usual sharpness tends to come back fairly quickly. Now, before we close, I want to talk about something that ties all of this together, and this is the part I want you to actually remember, not just hear and forget. This week is not just something to survive. It is something you can actively work with, and the simplest way to do that is through a small, intentional ritual, something that helps you mark the shift instead of just being swept along by it. Here is a simple one you can do, and it takes less than 10 minutes. Find a quiet moment, ideally in the evening when the day has settled. Light a candle if you have one, or simply sit somewhere calm. Take a few slow breaths, longer exhale than inhale, until your body starts to settle. Then on a piece of paper, write down whatever has been surfacing for you this week. Memories, feelings, tiredness, anything that has felt heavy or unresolved. You do not need to fix it or explain it, just get it out of your head and onto the page. Once you have written it down, read it back to yourself quietly, and then say something simple like, "I release what I no longer need to carry, and I am open to what wants to begin." If you wrote on paper you are comfortable safely burning, you can burn it as a symbolic release. If not, simply folding it closed and putting it away works just as well. The physical action matters less than the intention behind it, closing one chapter deliberately instead of dragging it forward unprocessed. You can pair this with a few minutes of quiet reflection on what you actually want the next few weeks to feel like, not a rigid list of goals, just a general feeling. Do you want more ease, more clarity, more rest, more connection? Hold that feeling gently in your mind for a minute or two before you end the ritual. This works particularly well right now because you are moving through a new moon, which is traditionally considered the best time in any lunar cycle to release what is finished and quietly plant an intention for what comes next. You do not need candles, crystals, or any particular setup for this to matter. What matters is the intention behind it, the choice to consciously participate in this shift instead of just being carried through it exhausted and unaware of why. Rituals like this do not change the sky. What they change is you, how you move through what the sky is already doing, and that is genuinely powerful. So if you take one thing away from this video, let it be this. The way you have been feeling this week is real, it has a real explanation, and it is temporary. You are not behind, you are not broken, you are simply in the middle of a genuinely heavy cosmic stretch, and heavy stretches always pass. Be gentle with yourself, rest when you can. Watch your words a little more carefully than usual. Let old feelings surface without judging yourself for having them. And when you get a quiet moment, even just 10 minutes, use it to consciously close out what this week has stirred up, so you can move into what comes next with a little more clarity and a little less weight. If this explained what you have been feeling, let me know in the comments, and tell me which part hit closest to home, the tiredness, the fog, or the old memories resurfacing. I read every comment, and it helps me know what to cover next. If content like this is useful to you, consider subscribing because the sky is not slowing down anytime soon, and I want you to be prepared for whatever comes next instead of blindsided by it. Take care of yourself this week. You are doing better than you think you are. One last thought before you go. Weeks like this tend to get remembered later, not for how productive they were, but for what quietly shifted underneath the surface. A few months from now, you may look back and realize this was the week something finally started to loosen, a pattern you had been stuck in, a feeling you had been avoiding, a decision that finally became clear once the fog lifted. You may not be able to see that yet, and that is completely normal. Clarity about a heavy week almost always arrives after the week is over, not during it. So if today has felt confusing, tiring, or strangely emotional, you do not need to solve it or fully understand it right now. You just need to get through it gently, take care of your body, protect your peace where you can, and trust that the fog you are walking through right now is not permanent. It is simply the part of the cycle that comes right before things become clear again. Hang in there. The clearing is closer than it feels.